Hi friends, in today's lecture, we will study how to make a simple dashboard in Microsoft Excel in less than 10 minutes. So for this particular project, we'll require a file called as sales data. The link for downloading that file is already provided to you below this video. Now, what is this file about? This file contains the sales data of our employer, and we want to make a simple dashboard for this in less than 10 minutes. So let us see how to proceed. First, you have to click anywhere in the data and then convert this into a table. So to convert it into a table, click on Insert and then select Table. It will ask you, my table has headers. Just ensure that there is a check mark over there and then click on OK. Now the table is created. After that, we'll give a name for this table. So we'll click on Table Design and then over here on the left side where you have the table name, I will give the name as Sales and hit Enter. Now I want to make a pivot table out of this table. So I would click on Insert and in Insert I would select Pivot Table. Then it would automatically select the sales table and it would ask me where you want the data. So I want the data in a new worksheet. So I will select New Worksheet and then click on OK. After that, I want the employee names should be shown in the rows like this. So you can see there's a huge list of employee names in the row column. And then in the values column, I want to show the quantity. So I'll scroll over here, come to quantity and bring over here. Now, using this data, I want to make a pivot chart. So I will click anywhere inside this data and then in the pivot table analyze, you have the pivot chart. So I click on pivot chart and then click on bar, and in bar I would select clustered bar and then click on OK. Now I get a clustered bar over here like this. Now I do not need the total, so I select the total and I delete it. Now over here, if you see that you get a drop down, so I click on this drop down and in the drop down I select value filters and in value filters I select top 10. So I get to this particular dialog box in which it asks me top 10 items sum of quantity. So that is exactly what I want, and so I would click on OK and instantly it shows me the top 10 employee names and their sales figures. Now I want to sort this data, so I would right click anywhere on this column and there you have the option to sort the data. Now I want to sort from smallest to largest, so I select that and you can see the data gets sorted from smallest to largest. So this was our first graph. Now I want to create the second graph. So to create the second graph, I again click on raw data and then click on Insert, and in Insert I select pivot table. Now it will show me that it will use the same sales table and where you want the data. Now instead of new worksheet, I would select existing and in the location I would come to sheet 1 and click somewhere over here. Then I would click on OK. Now what I want over here is I want to create a timeline. So there is one field called as the order date. So I click on the order date over here like this. So you get the order date and you can see Excel automatically breaks it into years and quarters. So now I scroll down, and on the right side, I want the order total. So I select the order total and bring it on the values column. Now I want to make a timeline out of this. So here I want a line graph. So I would click on insert. I would click on line graph, and in line graph I would select the first line graph, and I get the line graph. I would just minimize my screen so that you can see both the data together. Now you will see that you get the data, but the graph is not very readable. So you get one plus button over here. So if I click on plus button, notice what happens over here. So it drills down the data into quarter wise, and once again I would click over here, and this is what I want the data. So it shows quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3, quarter 4 for 2019, 2020 and 2021. I can just maximize the graph to see if it is showing me the entire data. Now once I am convinced that my graphs are proper, the next step is to create a slicer. So to create a slicer, we will first click on the upper graph like this, and then I would click on pivot chart analyze and select insert slicer. Now here's the slicer which is inserted, and from here I would select sales region and click on OK. So you get a slicer for the sales region. Now I can increase the width of the slicer. So you get a lot of space over here. So what you can do, in the slicer you have columns. So right now it is 1. So let us make it to 3, and then reduce the width of this slicer, and then bring this somewhere in the center. Now let us see if the slicer is working. So I click on Central East, and it shows me the data for Central East. If I click on Northwest, it shows me the data for Northwest. But if you notice that when I click on any of these data, it doesn't change the data for the lower graph. So I want that both the graphs should change when I click on any of the items from the slicer. So if you want to do that, ensure that your slicer is selected, then click on the slicer menu and select report connections. In report connections, ensure that the pivot table 4, that is this pivot table, is also selected, and then click on OK. Now if you click on any of the data, you will see that both the charts get reflected. In the same way, I want to create a timeline slicer over here. So I click over here, and now I want to insert another slicer. So I'll click first on my data, then I would click on pivot table analyze, and then I would select on insert timeline this time. So in timeline you get only one field, order date. I select that and I click on OK, and the order date comes over here. Now let me just adjust the width of both so that they look symmetrical. So I bring this here and I increase this width up to here. So both the graphs look meaningful now, and I select this slicer and I increase the width of this slicer as well. Now let us see if this slicer is working. So I come right to the beginning of the slicer and I select January like this to a specific range, and you can see the data is changed. I select from year to year and the data is changed. But if you watch, it changes the data only for the lower graph. It doesn't change for the upper graph. If you want the upper graph should be changed as well, then ensure that your slicer is selected. Then go on timeline, and in timeline select report connections, ensure that pivot table 3, which is the upper table, is selected and then click on OK. Now if you select any of the data from the range, both the data or both the graphs would be affected. So you can see it. And same way over here also. So this is our completed dashboard, which is for beginners and which we have studied to create in less than 10 minutes. Hope you have learned something new. If you like this video, don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and we'll see you again in the next video. Till that time, goodbye.